Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, How to Validate App Performance in the Cloud at Scale. Before we begin, I just want to make a few announcements. My name is Jason Silverman, by the way. I am with CA BlazeMeter. And I do thank you all for joining us. So the few announcements is that today's webinar is being recorded, and all people who registered will be receiving the recording tomorrow. Likely, in an email, so keep an eye out for that. So also, if you miss anything during the webinar, in any case, you'll be receiving the full recording. Secondly, our webinars are always better with audience participation, and we do very much encourage questions. We always reserve about 10 minutes for questions at the end of each webinar. We often get a lot of good questions, but any questions that you want to ask on today's webinar topic, that would be best, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. If we don't get to your question by any chance, we have them in the system if you do ask them, and we'll try to get back to you via email. Finally, at the end of today's webinar, and I'll give you a reminder later on, there'll just be a short 30-second survey that will pop up. And the reason why we value this survey is because, one, it gives us the opportunity to gain your feedback about how the webinar went and how we can make them more valuable in the future. So please be honest and tell us what you liked and what maybe how we can improve. And secondly, it will give you the opportunity, if you want to request a follow-up session with either of the participating companies today, with BlazeMeter or with Quali, for you or for your testing team, to address your specific needs. It'll give you that opportunity as well. So with that said, today's webinar, as I mentioned, is called How to Validate App Performance in the Cloud at Scale. We will have two presenters today. One from CA BlazeMeter is Wing Ho, Principal Customer Success Manager. And we'll also be joined by Pascal Joly, Director of Technology Partnerships at Quali. Wing, if you can just move to the next slide. So just very briefly, today's agenda, and then I'll pass things over to our presenters. We'll be looking at why teams should adopt a continuous testing strategy. Then after that, we will see the different solutions from BlazeMeter and Quali and how they can work together, including a demo as well. And finally, as I mentioned, we will reserve some time for Q&A. You don't have to just reserve your questions until the end. You can ask them at any point in the questions tab on the webinar control panel, but we will leave some time at the end of the webinar to address them. So with that said, I am now going to turn things over to Wing. Wing, over to you.
Great, thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Again, my name is Wing Ho. I'm from CA BlazeMeter. I'm joined here by our colleague here, Pascal. So Pascal is going to kick us off with what we want to talk about today.
Yeah. So if you're attending this webinar, chances are that you're involved one way or another with web applications, and some of those trends will seem like I'm preaching to the choir. But I just want to highlight some key points that are relevant in the context of this webinar. And the first point is that most companies today are focused on improving the end-user experience of their customers with new digital mobile platforms. And for that, these companies are using public cloud resources, or they want to use public cloud resources and services. And we just came out of the AWS reInvent show recently that introduced yet another tens of new services. So we want to take advantage of that. And then once they move their application in the cloud, or they're committed to do so, they want to scale the application and to handle this peak demand and have elasticity to be able to cover things like Black Friday or even Cyber Monday, which happened recently, and now the upcoming Christmas season. So in order to do that, you are adopting DevOps practices. And what does it mean? DevOps practices involve a variety of terms and processes like continuous testing, continuous deployment, shifting left, agility, and we're going to cover some of those topics today. So we're all on board with that. However, when you look at what's really happening is that in reality, in the real world today, when it comes to setting up a test environment, it's very much a manual process, and it ends up being a huge undertaking. So these environments are very much static. They take a huge amount of time to set up, maybe sometimes several months. And once they're set up, you don't touch them. They sit there forever, and they do not scale. And they end up being costly if they involve resources deployed in the public cloud. So on the other hand, manual testing, which is what is the sort of the default today, has very low coverage, which means it has also, since it's manual, it has a high overhead of resources to configure and set up those tests. And as a result, bugs and performance glitches are uncovered in live environments, which is really not good for the customer experience. So now I'm going to let Wing cover some of the trends around continuous testing that are trying to address these problems.
Yeah. Thanks, Pascal. So basically, what Pascal just talked about is, you need to first set up your environment so that your application, has an environment to actually to perform it, right? So, but the idea of testing, continuously, what really does that mean?